All right, welcome everyone. I don't think we have any viewers right now, but welcome to our very first Caring Counts live. I believe we're live, so this is pretty cool. It's our very first one, so welcome. So you might be thinking to yourself, what is Caring Counts? What does that even mean, right? Well, Caring Counts is an event that Applewood Our House put on about a year ago now, when we could do kind of in-person events. And it was all about sharing experiences within memory care. And we got to hear from some amazing people. We got to hear from Dr. Potter, in my opinion, a front runner in the research of Alzheimer's here in Colorado. We got to hear from family members. We got to hear from professional caregivers. We even got to hear from someone that has Alzheimer's as well. It was so powerful to hear from all these experiences. And from those experiences, we were able to find kind of common ground, commonalities. And from that common ground, we were able to find support. And it was really cool. We were able to really feel like we were together. And with that support, it really came from, you can find support with your successes. You can find support during your struggles. It was really powerful. So that's our goal with these Facebook Lives. We're no longer able to do, at least at the moment, in-person events. And so now we're taking it to Facebook Live. Caring Counts Live, here we are. And our first guest, I should go over our goal with this, is to find that common ground. And with that, our first guest is Bridget Nimaxira. She's also from Applewood Our House. So Bridget, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, yep, glad you're here. And first of all, let's hear a little bit about you and maybe a little bit about Applewood as well.
Okay, I started working from the ground up as we created Applewood. I work in the office area. I do accounting. So I don't have the skills and all the amazing ability that the caregivers and the house managers have. And it's been quite beautiful for me to see how they interact with the residents. And it's been quite an adventure, one that I never would have guessed, but it's quite interesting to see. Applewood Our House, we have assisted living memory care homes for five houses for residents with memory care issues. So dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, any kind of memory care issues. So it's a secured facility. And so I've been with the company since we started. And what else?
Well, I would love to hear, I think you have a very unique perspective. You said you're from kind of the back office, if you will, which is still very important work. And we also want to commend our frontline workers as well, of course, caregivers and house managers. But from your perspective, you and your grandmother, you have kind of your own experience with memory care in your family. And I would love to hear more about the experiences you had both working in the industry, but then also the experiences you had with your grandmother as well. And before we get into that, I want to give a big welcome to Dale. Thanks for being here, Dale. I see your comment. So we appreciate your comment. Thank you so much for being here. Bridget, let us know a little bit more about your experiences with your grandmother.
Okay, so my grandmother had dementia. We didn't realize that she had dementia. And I work with people who know about dementia. We didn't realize until, I would say, at least 10 years after that she had dementia. And it was quite a surprise because she was a very strong personality. And she was like a big matriarch of a family. And she would like lay down the law and tell you what's what, and you do what she said. And so as the dementia was happening, we would just say, grandma's behaving kind of strange. And what I've found through working with Applewood, well, first of all, it's kind of embarrassing that I didn't recognize it.
I don't think it's embarrassing, but go on.
Yeah. And I think maybe that is quite a common thing, is you don't recognize it because it does happen gradually. And I mean, she was 94, I believe, something like that. So, for a very long time, she worked She worked until she was 86 years old with the.
Okay, wait a second. She worked until she was 86?
Yes, she worked
That's
till she was
incredible.
86. Yeah, she
Wow.
worked for EEOC, which is Equal Employment Opportunity Commission.
Okay.
If you had a discrepancy, if you thought that you weren't being treated fairly in the workplace, she would be the investigator to come and decide whether or not you had a valid case.
Would you say that maybe that's where like laying down the law kind of came from, that investigation experience, if you will?
Yeah, probably. And she would too. She got to the point where she would start to tell stories that weren't actual stories anymore. And she would say, but I know because I'm an investigator. So because of that clout behind her, I think it even made it more difficult for us to recognize that she was having memory issues.
Yeah. Thank you, Christine, for being here, watching from Morrison. Glad you're with us this morning. We just got another comment from Malou. So many people don't know or see dementia until it is very far along. I think that's true, and that is a perfect segue into my next question for you, Bridget. You said that you kind of felt embarrassed, which I don't want to take that feeling away. I think that's very valid about not knowing, but I think it's also somewhat common not to know for a little bit. 10 years, 5 years, I don't know. I think everyone's different, but I think that it's more common than we think to not really recognize the signs of dementia. So what more can you tell us about that? What was that like for you being her granddaughter?
Well, the signs still didn't present themselves until after. And then I would talk to our administrator, Sherry Bonham, and the things that she said were so common for people. Things like paranoia. She would say she lived in a condominium, and she would say that people were coming in through the ceiling. And, we would just kind of go, come on, Grandma. But we didn't recognize that she was actually thinking that was true. We thought she was just kind of playing with us.
Yeah, that was real for her.
Yeah, it was real for her. So that a little bit of paranoia, just making up stories that weren't true. And as time got on, the stories started getting a little bit, I would say, on the meaner side. And so, it just didn't seem quite right.
Yeah, you could tell something was kind of off. So looking back about 10 years ago, had you recognized it? I mean, what did you notice as dementia? I mean, some of the stories you've already said about things coming through the vents, did you say?
The ceiling, the holes in the ceiling.
Right, of course.
That can move, yeah.
Were there any other signs that, knowing what you know now today, that you were like, oh, that was maybe a sign?
It would be those types of things. She accused someone of coming into her house, breaking into her house, and baking cookies. Just kind of unusual things like that. But honestly, it just seemed like she was being funny. It didn't seem like that was what she was actually experiencing. Right.
Yeah. And for that, I mean, what was the hardest part for you and your family going kind of through this process, this journey, if you will?
Well, I think we didn't realize that she had Alzheimer's until she had done some injury to her knee, and she had to go to the hospital, and the doctor wouldn't release her. And so at that point, she felt like we were not letting her go home. And we actually didn't have any say at that point. She couldn't be by herself anymore. So I think that was the hard part. I think also through the whole process, the hardest part was not necessarily agreeing with the choices of the POA that she had chosen.
Okay.
Not the person, but their choices that they were making on her behalf.
Right. I understand. Yeah. So let's go back a little bit. She was in the hospital, and that's when kind of the memory care conversation kind of started?
Right.
Okay.
Right. The doctor said she can't go and live in her home anymore.
Right. So at that point, you and your family were looking for secured care.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay. And let's chat a little bit more about this POA situation. You said she not being happy with the decisions being made for her. What happened? What was that like for you?
Oh, well, I think she changed her POA multiple times because I think along with the paranoia comes that this person isn't making the right decisions that I want, but she's not recognizing that she can't be on her own anymore. So she would change for several years, actually. On occasion, she would change the POA, the power of attorney. And so at some point she changed it away from my mom, who's an only child.
Mm-hmm.
And when the decisions were made by, well, she had actually asked one of my siblings and one of my brothers, and he said no, he didn't want to do it. And
Right. It's a big responsibility.
yeah, it's a big responsibility. And so then when the one finally was making some decisions about where she would go, I thought the decision should be made with my mom's best interest because it's the only child. And so I was getting a little bit bent out of shape. And then I was talking to my mom and she said, no, she said she made her power of attorney who she made, and that person's choices are the choices, period. So she was fantastic about it. I was the one kind of like, it should be easier for my mom. It should be closer to my mom, you know, that kind of stuff. So, and I don't think I ever like shared that information with my brother. I just felt bad that I thought that the choices should have been in my mom's best interest since, you know, it was her mom.
Right. And I think what we need to recognize here is a sense of recognition that this big change happened within a family, right? Someone needs secured memory care. That's a big change. And we're all kind of, everyone in the family, I don't want to speak for you, but if I'm understanding you correctly, everyone in the family is kind of shifting around, finding their new normal. And that dynamic can change, and it can often create some struggles and some things to overcome during those situations.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good thing my mom was so level-headed, and she said whatever he chooses is perfectly fine because she chose him. And so that was wonderful. But you know, if all of us had different opinions and we're struggling and fighting with that, that would be very difficult. And I have seen that on occasion with some of the families in our houses.
Right. And so what you're getting at is it's a little more common than we think, or maybe we don't have those preconceived notions, but yeah, it's common for sure. So speaking of, you know, your mom being level-headed, right? I asked you kind of what the hardest part about the whole situation was. What would be the silver lining, the greatest part of this process?
The greatest part. Well, there were quite a few things. My sister lives in Singapore, and she came early because we knew that the time was coming near. So she got to spend a lot of time with my grandmother. When my grandmother had passed and we had the funeral, I had such a proud feeling. It was if I was her looking at her family. I was just so proud of everyone. It was kind of took me off guard, took me by surprise that was my response.
Yeah, that sounds great, and I'm really glad. You said your sister?
Mm-hmm. I have two brothers and a sister, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So we have a question that just came in on the comments. It's from Malou, and she's wondering, how did you learn about assisted living homes? Were you part of that process at all, being the granddaughter, and help out with finding those?
For where she stayed or in general?
I think both. Let's go with both.
In general, I had just heard about them through, through Lifetime, assisted living homes. I didn't know until I started working with Applewood that memory care secured is very different. That there's a whole bunch of different levels of assisted living. And our administrator, I gave her phone number to my brother, and she helped him through the process, and I just stayed out of it.
So what I'm hearing too, and I see this in this industry a little bit, is really finding a connection within the industry, like an administrator, to ask questions. What type of care am I even looking for right now? What type of care does my loved one need? I think that's really great, and having a personal connection is so important. To find those different types of care and the right care for you and your family and your loved one. Would you agree?
I would. And if you didn't, if they didn't have our administrator as somebody that they worked with, I wouldn't even know where to start. So right. I can see why it would be very daunting for someone who got this diagnosis or came to the point where they needed someone and didn't know where to even begin. I can see that would be very, yeah.
I love that little kind of golden nugget that we just found. Maybe people know it, maybe they don't, but even if you reach out to a facility or a community that you don't think is right, or maybe is not quite the right level of care for you, you can find a connection. And within that community, there are so many people that care that they're going to pass you to someone that will really know what you need, or give you a number or a connection that you can go follow, which is great.
That's true. That's true. They're very caring, and they would pass your name to the right person, get you to the right place. If you didn't need memory care, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Great. Yeah, that's awesome. Malu, thank you for your question. So appreciate it. If anyone has any other questions about Bridget's experience that maybe we can talk about, you can certainly post those in the comments. We'd be happy to chat about those. So we've talked about your grandma kind of switching POAs and placement and things like that. And you mentioned that she has passed. Now, I'll be honest, we talked a little bit before we went live about some fun funeral, kind of a funeral story that you have. I would love to share that with our audience. I just think it's a really good story.
Well, my grandmother had a lot of really great friends that she worked with, obviously, for years at EEOC. And one of the ladies came to the funeral, the memorial service, and then I don't know if it was open, if anybody wanted to come up and talk or whatever, but this lady decided that she did. And she came up and she just talked about how much she enjoyed working with Lee. And this lady also on her, I guess her side job, she was a clown. So in the funeral, this lady did a cartwheel just I guess to cheer everyone up. I'm not really sure why she did it, but it was very funny.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is just such a great story. A kind of a celebration of life, if you will. I just think that's great. So thank you for sharing that. I love that. And then throughout this whole process with your grandmother, from your perspective, being a granddaughter, right? What have you learned from this, and what would you like our audience to kind of take away from your experiences?
Probably what we already talked about is, although to you it is so unknown and so unfamiliar, the people in the industry, the people who have gone through it, the situations can be so very similar that you feel like it's all brand new to you. But if you can just reach out to someone that has experience in the industry, or an administrator, or a friend or family who has experienced it, you'll see that there's a lot of similarities. So it feels very daunting, but there are plenty of people out there that are happy to help guide you.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing from you too is taking the first step. That can be really daunting and very challenging, and you should do it definitely in your own time. But taking that first step is so important. And we're a community, an industry of people that care. And so I think that's great. That's so great. So I think that about wraps it up for us here for our very first Caring Counts Live. Bridget, I want to extend the most sincere, biggest thank you I can to you for sharing your story about your grandmother, for all the work that you do for Applewood, and everything. And being here today, I just so appreciate it. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course, I'm glad you're here. And we'll be going live every other Wednesday from now on. So we're super excited to be doing these. So in 2 Wednesdays from now, we will have another Facebook Live, and we'll be sharing some more stories, some more commonalities, some more experiences. I'll do a couple other shout outs before we jump off. Melissa, my aunt, is watching. That's so great. She said, great conversation. Thank you, Melissa. Christine commented again, thank you for the story and your time. Thank you, Christine, for being here. We're doing this for you guys to share commonalities and experiences. Dale also said, thank you so much, Bridget. So thank you, Dale, for being here, for watching with us. If you're watching back on the recording, please feel free to comment. We can get your question to Bridget. I can do my best to answer your question. As I said, we're a community that cares, whether it's memory care or assisted living or whatever care you need, we're here to help. So we're super excited. Thanks for being here, and that'll do it for us.